Thank you.
All right,
I'll
welcome
continue to
everyone.
monitor the attendees and admit as needed.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone. It's May 13th, 2024, and it is 6:01. It is the school committee meeting of North Middlesex. Right. Present, we have June McNeil, Randy Rush, Will Hackler. Whoops, I need to call roll call. Randy?
Here.
June?
Here.
Will?
Here.
Patrick?
Here.
Is that all that I see?
Yes, looks it.
The next scheduled meeting of the North Middlesex Regional School Committee will be held at 6 p.m. on Thursday, June 13th, 2024. The consent agenda, approval of the minutes of April 29th, 2024, accounts payable warrants dated April 30th, $50,085, dated the 5th or May 2nd, $275,510.09, dated May 9th, $354,572. Payroll warrants dated April 25th, 2024 and May 9th, 2024. The donations of $40.87 from Ohio Ply Prince Incorporated to North Middlesex Regional High School for clothing sales program.
So moved.
Second.
That is Will and June. Randy?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And Patrick?
Yes.
All right.
We have a few more
Jill is
joined. So
here.
Jill
Lisa.
Twig and
Okay.
Bill Berg is
Okay.
joined as well.
Jill Twig and Bill.
Mm-hmm. Hold on. Just trying to, I promoted him, but I don't see Bill in here. Oh, here he is. Okay.
All right. All right, do we have public comment?
We have one person signed up for public comment, Melissa Boyland. Let me just allow her to talk. I can find her in here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you for allowing me to speak. Oh, Melissa Boylan, 1392 West State Road in Ashby. Good evening. Thank you for letting me address the committee tonight. I just multiple times in the past few weeks, I've heard that Mr. Morgan and other school committee members have identified that the building closure would be or has potential to be Ashby Elementary School again. I'd like to remind everyone that Mr. Morgan and the school committee on at least 3 occasions in public assured the townspeople that if we were to put in the $300,000 that Ashby remain open and we would not have to go through this every year. I'm hoping that you can address this rumor and that you're not going back on your word now after the town of Ashby has started to invest their money. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Melissa. All right. Chairperson's report. I do have a statement that I'm going to read. I speak before you tonight with a profound sense of purpose and determination. Our school district ties together the 3 communities of Ashby, Pepperell, and Townsend, and together we fly under the banner We Are NM. After attending each of the town meetings this past week, I report back to this committee. Our banner is tattered and in need of immediate repair. Our NM community faces a crucial challenge, one that requires unity, understanding, listening, and collective action. The challenge we are facing is the allocation of funding for our NM community. It is no secret that discussions surrounding community budgets have and can often invoke strong emotions and differing opinions. Let us not forget that our community is made up of diverse perspectives, experiences, and priorities. What may be a priority for one member of our community may not hold the same significance for another, and that's okay. Our strength lies in our diversity, in our ability to listen to one another with open hearts and minds, and in our willingness to find common ground. I firmly believe that in the face of adversity, we will all have the opportunity to rise above our differences and come together for our children and our community. Let us stand united to fix our tattered NM banner. We are NM. We are the towns of Ashby, Pepperell, and Townsend. Together, we are strong. All right, Mr. Superintendent Morgan, do you have a superintendent's report?
I do not, just discussion on the budget later on in the meeting.
All right.
Lisa, I just want to bring to your attention that we do have two people, two attendees with their hands up. I do not have them registered or signed in to speak on public comment. I don't know if you want to address it or. There are other hands going up.
What does the committee feel? Randy, June, Will, Patrick?
I'm fine with hearing public comment as long as we don't run over our allotted amount of time.
I agree with that.
Agree.
I agree with June.
Bill? Okay. All right, allow them to speak.
Okay, so.
We have about 10 minutes that we're gonna allow for everyone to speak. We have 3, so about 3 minutes each,
Yeah.
or
so-
2.
So it's Kathy Blair's.
All right,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes,
Hi, just so you know, I did submit one of the forms to ask to speak, but it was like just 5 minutes before the meeting, so I apologize. I flew in for a medical appointment at the last minute. I brought to the attention of our select board in Ashby, and I know June is aware of it as well as Mr. Morgan is aware of it. I started to question the nursing and therapies line in the budget because the exorbitant amount caught my attention. And I came upon a few different things, but one that was brought to everybody's attention that is something called the SBMP, the School-Based Medicaid Program. And it involves some mechanisms to get reimbursed for some of the services that are being provided. I know some questions were sent out. An email was sent out to, I believe, Nancy Haynes and the lady who was the, I think, health services director for the district. I don't know if anybody has responded yet, but I suspect that there are ways for the school. I understand the school-based needs, the IEPs. I know all that firsthand, but I suspect that there are some ways that the school can recoup some of the monies that are spent on some of these services. And so my question, since last Wednesday night when I first started looking into this, is A, are we doing any of that? B, why not? So I think given the budget situation And again, the exorbitant amount for that particular line item, I think it deserves some additional investigation.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Next. Who's next, Robin?
Give me 1 second, just. JB.
JB.
Hi, how you doing? This is David Nato. I'm not sure why I came up JB. I apologize for that. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I apologize. I did not submit a request to speak. I forgot. So I appreciate your time and allowing me to do so. I just wanted to make a comment. I did hear from a few residents that attended or listened to the Pepperell Town meeting and heard some muttering about possibly closing a building in the district. And the buildings that were possibly mentioned, I wasn't there, this is hearsay, Squannacook and Ashby Elementary. I find it a little disheartening that Ashby is being mentioned again. This will be the second time. And we have allocated $300,000 to repairing and upgrading our school, including probably investing more funds to do so for the security system. The Ashby Building Committee has been working tirelessly on developing a plan that they just voted on to do so. And I also want to thank David Murray because I know he's been putting in a lot more hours than he's probably being compensated for to get this plan together. I would like to hear from the school committee if this is fact or it could be just gossip. You know, putting in over $250,000 into a building and then talking about closing said building, I don't think it's going to go over too well in the community. And it's not going over too well with myself. I find it very disheartening. And if you guys could shed some, guys and girls, could shed some light on that, I would appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. All right. Is there one more, Robin?
No,
No more?
nope.
All right. We are on to new business. The Van Pool transportation contract of 24-20, running from 24 to 26. Is Nancy on?
Yes, I'm on.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. So this was on the agenda last time, and we didn't get through it. But this is the renewal of the van pool contract for this year that's about to end, and then 2 additional years. It's a 5-5-5-5, as in 5% for each year contract, but essentially with some language changes, but essentially similar to what we've had in the past. I believe that the contract was I believe it was in the packet. If anyone has any specific questions on it. Special ed transportation, just to add, is exempt from Chapter 30B. And we did not go out to bid. The last time we did go out to bid, we got only 1 response. So it didn't seem like it made sense to go through that effort to get another one response. And we've been working with Van Pool closely. I don't know if Brad Brooks wants to chime in on any of the changes or any of how it's been going this year to update the committee.
I can.
Brad?
So, I'm sorry, Lisa.
That's okay. Go ahead, Brad.
No, I was just saying, so Van Pool acknowledged several issues with driver calling out sick late and then students not being picked up, parents having to drive students in. We back-billed Vanpool when that happened. They actually hired a person, well, an additional dispatcher dedicated just to our district. And they also have a van that's on call that sits in the center of Townsend and is available should there be any issue, a flat tire or a driver call out or whatever. And while we occasionally have issues, we have 42 vans every day that drive our students, both in district and out of district placements. Their quality, their customer service and on-time performance has greatly improved. So we've been very fortunate that they were able to turn that around for us.
Thank you, Brad. Randy, did you have a question? I saw your hand pop up and down.
Yeah, I was going to ask Mr. Brooks about the service that we've been getting from them if we were happy. So thank you for answering that.
I've been much happier, and my office in particular is fielding way less phone calls with very frustrated, and rightfully so in some occasions, irate parents, waiting to go to work and then the van doesn't show up or the van is 45 minutes late. So that's improved greatly.
Thank you, Brad. All right. Any more questions? I am not seeing any, so I will take a motion. Do you want me to?
I move
Okay, go
to accept the new Vanpool transportation contract.
Second.
That was Randy and Will. All right. We are going to go down my list over here. Bill Berg. Bill? Oops. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was muted. Yes.
Will Hackler.
Yes.
June McNeil. Patrick McPhillips.
Yes.
Andy Rush.
Yes.
Jill Twigg.
She's not here. She lost power.
Okay. Lisa Bloom.
Yes.
And myself, yes.
I'd hold on one second. Jill told me she made it to the library. I think Jill might be here.
I am here. I'm sorry. I did make it to the library. I don't have any cell service when I have no power, but yes, I am here. My video doesn't work, but yes.
Okay. And Jill Twigg votes yes as well. So that is unanimous.
Thank you.
Now on to the budget discussion. I'm going to hand this over to Will and Brad. So I don't know who wants to go first, Will or Brad.
Yeah, I'll start out. I just want to point out to everybody that no one wants to be here. This is not where we want to be. Obviously, in these town meetings, we didn't get all the results we want, and there's still some, obviously things that are up in the air and subject to being finished. What I have requested, or the finance committee has requested of the administration, is to give us some options for worst case scenarios here. If we have to cut $3 million out of the budget, rough numbers here, what that would look like. As I said, no one wants to be here and no one wants to discuss this as terrible, decisions we have to make here. But it's also real. Like, we need to go through these scenarios and make some decisions at this level, for this, and give the administration direction on how to proceed from here. Just as a quote, I'll take from one of the town meetings. This is not an us versus them scenario. Unfortunately for us, this is a math problem. And we have been getting from the state, in all the years that I've been here, less than 1% increases from the state, and our expenses go up more than that. So we have to go to overrides at time, and that's what happens. And it's terrible and it's awful. And I know we don't want to discuss these things, but we have to go through these things and make the best decisions for our district. So I know we have these things in the packets to go over. different options. And unfortunately, I'm only on one screen this evening, so I have to switch back and forth, but there are, you know, 3 options in there I would like to go over and discuss. And I think some of the details here, I'll turn that over to, you know, Nancy and Brad to, you know, to cover, but you know, we need to do this. I know we don't want to, you know, but it's the hand we're dealt here, so.
Thanks, Will. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that a yes? I'm sorry, I'm back on,
Yep.
going
Yes.
back and forth between screens.
Yes, we can hear you.
So, okay, excellent. So we have created 3 options. I just want to be as clear as possible with this, that this is not a problem that I necessarily see going away. We've had a problem with the budget for many, many years, predating this current administration, going back a few decades anyway. And I'm sure you've all seen the national news. This is a problem at the national level. And unfortunately, with the way that regional districts are funded and the fact that we are a 3-district or a 3-town regional district, the override votes that are coming up are extremely important. And the reality of the situation is that if the overrides pass in 2 towns, but not all 3, that is likely going to leave a significant issue for that town to deal with next year, when the budget is supposed to be even more challenging. So the 3 options are all things that are keeping that in mind, realizing again that if we only need 2 of the 3 towns to have a budget, and as of right now, the budget has been passed in Pepperell, but they still have an override coming up. So if the override does not pass in Pepperell, then the funding becomes a problem. And then we have the overrides coming up, the votes in Townsend and Ashby. And again, realistically, it's going to be a problem. This year was an increase. The towns can only afford a 2.5% increase, and we are much, much higher than that. Right now, we're at 5.79%, but that's not how it translates to the 3 towns. It's actually higher for each individual town based on the number of students that go to the school district. So again, just putting it out there that there's a very good chance, even with the overrides passing in 2 of the 3 towns, that we could be back having this discussion next year again. And also want to be clear that this is, a lot of this is based on estimates and projections. The Finance Committee, again, asked for 3 options, coming up with in the neighborhood of $3 million in reductions for all 3 options. Option 1 and option 2 are pretty close, but they will actually be over because they do not take into account benefits at all, just salary. And then option 3 was, again, the potential of having to close a building. So I'll go through each one. Again, I cannot see everyone because I am on a separate screen. So if the school committee member has a question, please let me know and I will stop. So I'll go through the options. Option 1 is, again, just short of a $3 million reduction or savings, and that's to increase fees for all extracurricular activities across the board. That would, in essence, potentially bring upwards of $158,000 to the district that would help further fund extracurricular activities. Right now, we do not fully fund. We fund about 30% of extracurricular. So this would certainly go a long way with helping us get to closer to 50%. The other one would be instituting a fee for full-day kindergarten, and also adding a pre-K increase. So students that go to the preschool, there would be an increase there. And that would, again, projecting would be about a $361,500 $500 in assistance to the district. We have $200,000 in ESSER funds that have to be used by the end of September, but we may be able to extend that through the year. That came out last week. So we have an additional $200,000 to use there. $25,000 reduction in the curriculum budget, $150,000 reduction in technology, and then the potential of not funding the stabilization or OPEB fund for FY25. That would be a savings of $400,000. It is on the chart, but if you don't see the chart, you cannot see it. That is not something that the central office would recommend, only because it is one-time funds. So in essence, if we end up funding stabilization or OPEB, that $400,000, the only other way we could get there would be an additional $400,000 in staff. The other one would be using an additional $250,000 from E&D, the Excess and Deficiency Fund. Again, it's one-time funds. It is a dangerous thing to do with the budget because that money is not guaranteed. And again, if that is not considered, then we would have to potentially reduce staffing by another $250K. So stabilization, OPEB, and E&D, if we do not use any funds from that, we would be looking at about a $650,000 reduction on staff, in addition to what I'm going to share with you now. So for staffing, and all three plans have the same thing. It's just about a $1.5 million savings. Just check this out. So it would result in the reduction in 3 special education teachers, 7 academic teachers, 2 counselors, 9 paraprofessionals, moving from a registered nurse to an LPN in one of our schools, and then the reduction of 3.75 administrators. So a total loss of 24.75 FTEs. And again, that's just about a $1.5 million reduction. Questions on that potential plan? I'll stop with each one and take questions if any committee members have questions. And I'm glad Nancy's on the call as well.
Randy?
So my first question is kind of more of a correction. Looking at our proposed budget right now, we already have the stabilization fund for capital stabilization reduced from $250,000, which we normally put into $100,000. So the $400,000 is not there to take out in your scenario.
Do you want to comment on that, Nancy?
Yeah, Randy, I'll take a look at that. I thought we had that in the budget. I apologize if we didn't, but I'll take a look while we're talking.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Brad, if you can go over what fees for the extracurricular will result in the $158,000 we had talked about. Potentially just after school activities. We talked about increases in the sports. Which fees constitutes the $158,000?
Sure. So for high school fees, athletic, band, percussion, winter guard, there would be a $150 increase per season. Parking would go from $75 to $200. That's a $125 increase. Students that participate in drama at the high school level would be $150 per show. And students that participate in other clubs and activities at the high school, not anything we've already discussed, that would be $150 for unlimited access to other clubs at the high school. For middle school, the drama productions would be $100 per show. And then all the middle school clubs and activities would be a $100 activity card that again gives access to all clubs and activities at the school. Both of those together create the $150,000, again, projected.
Yeah.
If we increase our pre-K fee, where there is currently a wait list, we've already approved a 5% increase, but if we go with a 10% increase, that would be an additional $11,500. And if we charge for full day kindergarten with a staggered reduced and free lunch option as well, that's projected at a $350,000 impact to the district. So all in all, $361,500 on that, on top of, and then the 158 on top of that.
Thank you, Brad. One other quick question. With using the $200 from ESSER funds, if we're allowed to do that, what are we losing out that we were going to spend that money on?
Gary, would you like to take that?
Actually, I'll defer to Nancy. I don't have that chart in front of me.
Can you repeat the question, Randy?
The question is, if we're using $200,000 in ESSER funds, obviously we weren't putting it towards the budget, and we were looking to use it by the end of September, I think was the original date. What did we have it earmarked for? So what are we not going to do if we put that money towards the budget?
So I guess I can kind of skim through what we think we're going to be, we would have used it for.
And we have not submitted a plan for it. Just
yeah, it would have to be approved by DESI, the change in the ESSER use. So we would have to go back to them and provide a new plan and get that pre-approved. I don't see a problem getting it pre-approved, but I just wanted to let everybody know that. Okay. So there were there's some balance in some of the teacher lines that are in the ESSER fund, about 84,000. And I haven't updated this tonight, but something around these numbers are kind of rough at this point. Curriculum stipends that we hadn't used yet. Software, some remaining software or online subscriptions. We had some funding in there for PD for the interventionists. Not all of that was used. We had contracted services, which we used for some of the social emotional programs and we have approximately 30,000 left in that. There was a little bit of money. We had interventionists hired in the ESSER grant, which were staff that helped bring students back up to speed. And there's a little bit of money left in those two lines. So on the interventionist and then the behavior technician line. So we would basically combine all those and utilize those for things that are in the budget this year.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Will,
Anyone
do you
else?
have, whoops. Will, do you have any questions?
I did. And Nancy, just on the public comment, we were discussing the comment came up about the Medicare reimbursement. I know we've seen that in as a revenue line in the past.
Yeah, so it is. I apologize. I've been out of the office for a few days and catching back up. But the Medicaid line, we do bill for services that students receive, and those funds come in. You can actually see it in the public presentation as a revenue source just after E&D. So we bill and received reimbursement back of about $350,000, or that's what we're estimating for FY25. So that happens. We have a variety of people that assist with that in the district. Some staff do a quarterly report of staffing that has to be submitted. We have random moments of time which have to be reported, which another staff member handles. And that billing happens and we get reimbursed. So that's the short answer on that.
I'm just going to go around. Lisa Bloom, any questions on the first proposal? June, any questions?
Not yet, thank you.
Jill Twig,
No, not
questions?
yet. I don't have any questions.
Patrick,
Nope. I've been doing a lot of research this week. No questions at this time.
and Bill Berg.
No, not just yet. No.
Bill, do you want to be called Bill or William?
Bill, please.
All right.
Thank you.
And I have a question. Just, Nancy, can you explain what a stabilization fund and an OPEB fund are, just to the public? And what an E&D is? We'll take all three of these here.
Sure. So the E&D I'll start with, I guess that is the net, essentially any funds that are left over at the end of the year or revenue that is greater than we anticipated, that goes into the E&D fund, which is certified, just very similar to a town's free cash. It's certified, and then the school committee has the authority to appropriate out of it. We typically appropriate it to the budget. This year, we're using just over $2 million in E&D for the budget that was voted on April 29th. And there's about 630,000 remaining in that E&D fund. The E&D fund is one of the few accounts that we can use mid-year if we need to, if something were to come up, an emergency or some kind of a last minute thing that one of the buildings needed that we didn't know. But again, if we did vote that, it would have to be approved by the member towns. So that's E&D. And I believe since we have approximately 629,000 left, we had the various options had only not using the entire amount. I don't believe one of the option has the whole amount, right, Brad?
Yes.
630? Okay. So other OPEB or other post.
Oh, wait, Nancy, I'm sorry. Let me just correct that. It doesn't have the full amount. It has, I just have to go back to another screen. It's using an additional 400,000.
Okay.
That's the most, not,
So
it's not using all of it.
So that option would leave about 200,000 for some unforeseen emergency between now and the next year. We also have other post-employment benefits, and that's a fund that was established a number of years ago for future health insurance costs, typically retiree costs. We'd have a pay-as-you-go plan where we appropriate the amount of the money needed for retiree health insurance and active employee health insurance. But there's a regulation, a new GASB regulation that requires that we actually report the amount of future costs of employees that leave. So the other post-employment benefit fund, we've been trying to put funds into that. Again, it's it's long-term money to be used at a later date to cover costs of retiree health. And it can actually be used for either active or retiree. So that goes into an investment account. Plan is long-term money for that. So that the larger it gets, the less of a liability would be shown on the district's balance sheet. And the stabilization account was established, I believe, 3 years ago, and we've made approximately three deposits to that 2 or 3 years ago. And that is, the intention of that is to set up a capital stabilization account so that it can be built up over time and help deal with some of the capital costs. Right now, we appropriate about $250,000 in the budget to handle capital, and it's never quite enough. And we're always scrambling, trying to find funds to do the larger projects, say a roof or some kind of an extended window or technology upgrade or something like that. So as that fund builds up, we'll be able to use those funds down the road. Again, and they make money in interest over time. And again, it's a long-term funding was the idea, or to get it to be large enough so that we could do some of these other projects without asking the member towns. I think that was it, right? Did I get everything?
I think so. Thank you, Nancy.
Sure.
All right, any more questions?
I guess my only comment can I just make one comment about those two funds? So we could, using those funds, it's an option. The problem with, I just want to bring up is that next year, if we decide we want to go back to those larger numbers, it's going to be very difficult, because unless there's some funding source, maybe we get to the end of the year and we have a little bit of money we could put into one of these or E&D next year, but I don't see that next year having the same amount, as much E&D or as we've had this past few years. So I think it'd be very difficult if we do reduce it to have it come back up without it being 100% on the towns. it just makes it really challenging. So just wanted to bring it back.
Thank you, Nancy.
Sure.
All right. On to option
Go
2,
back.
if there's no more
So
questions.
option 2 is basically just flipping stabilization and E&D. Again, it is one-time money. It'd be very, very difficult to continue moving forward in that direction. We've increased, especially E&D pretty much every year. And it's really something that we should be using for emergencies as opposed to the operating budget. So option 2 is really just a flip of OPEB and stabilization and using more money from E&D as opposed to more money from stabilization or OPEB. But again, looking at potentially an additional $650,000 in staffing reductions. Option 3, you want me to go to that?
Are there any questions on option 2? Everybody is good? All right. Option 3.
Okay, option 3 is again, this is the one that would deal with a building closure. We have the increased fees for extracurriculars, pre-K and full-day kindergarten, use of the ESSER funds, the curriculum and technology reductions, using an additional $200,000 from E&D, and then the closure of a building. And when you look at the buildings and what buildings could potentially be looked at, obviously it is Squanicook and Ashby. The problem with looking at Squanicook is that in all reality, we would lose our ability to house our pre-K program in a centrally located spot, which would have an impact on transportation and service provider costs, where it is an integrated preschool that has both general education and special education students in it. It would create, although this is a much a more minor certainly issue, is central office would have to be broken up throughout the district, basically into spaces that are available. So that would certainly be a problem. And then the other piece with Squanicook is that it is still currently under lease through December. But Keystone has mentioned previously that they may be able to leave at the conclusion of this school year if it was absolutely necessary. And looking at Ashby, it does project to be a potential savings of $400,000 to $600,000 annually. It is primarily due to a reduction in staffing overall. It would lead to a reduction of 4 teachers, a nurse, paraprofessionals, custodian, secretary, and also utilities, which again come right out to around $520,000 totally. But that's what we're looking at, as well as potential future capital costs and facilities plans for Ashby moving forward. So again, none of these, and that creates a savings of just over $3 million, $3,039,500 in option 3. Again, none of these have benefits included into them, but that is essentially what it would look like as far as a savings would go. And then we'd have to look at the potential of having a early childhood center at Squanicook, where it would likely be a combination of Ashby and Townsend, pre-K to grade 1. And then Spalding would likely be a combination of Ashby and Townsend, grades 2 to 4. But no guarantees with that either, because we still would have to talk to Keystone.
June.
I have several comments to make, so I just want to be cognizant of time. I have a lot of points to make about this, starting with, we had this exact same conversation last year. So many of you have heard me say my points over and over and over. This is actually the 4th time in my 5 years that we've had this discussion. But last year, when this was discussed, the town of Ashby, as you are aware, had opted to give the district $300,000 towards repairs. And in these public meetings, part of the conversation was that this would not come up again, provided the school remains safe. So the building committee has been working hard over the last 18 months, trying to determine how to best spend this money. Our last 2 meetings were with the select board and town administrator, and we allocated the majority of this out already. And this is money being spent on the school as an investment, showing that the town is fully invested in keeping this open as a school. And if we're not going to go that route all of a sudden, we should not be taking Ashby's 300,000. First of all, I mean, 30,000's already been spent. And we should probably be giving that back too, because this money was taken under false pretenses if we're going to continue to talk about closure. And so I'm at this point, I'm wondering if we should just schedule another meeting and rescind our last vote to just hold on to that and wait and see, because Ashby would be spending their money very, very differently if it was not going to be investing in this building as a school. So that is one point. And like I said, I don't want to rehash everything that I've said over and over, time after time, year after year, but it does come down to equity with the students. We talk about we are NM, and we want our children to have the same education across all 3 towns. And this would change everything. Not only are you asking Ashby children to be on buses longer than the rest of the students, an hour bus ride each way, that's a lot of time to take out of a little kid's day, where the kids in the other towns could be using that time to play with their friends, do their homework. It's just such a disadvantage for Ashby students. Not to mention the class structuring, that now we're talking about having one town with like K-5 and another town, we're breaking that out into different groups. We won't have the same age structures across different towns. It would be a completely different learning experience. And speaking of buses, we have to consider the increased costs of transportation, possible increased costs of special ed costs, because there is going to be an impact to these little kids when they're taken away from their families off to a different town in a community they're not as familiar with. So, so we have those costs, but also the last time this came up last year, we were talking about 300 to 400,000 in repairs to Squanicook to even be able to make this transition. So we're really not actually saving any money on the budget this year once we do that. Another point I wanted to make is what you're doing to this community if you close their only school. When a town does not have a school to offer their children, home values decrease. If we're looking at a 10% decrease on the average home in Ashby, out of the 1,350 homes, you're talking about taking away $67,500,000 from our community. That's a lot of money compared to the drop of the bucket that you just said, 400,000 or so a year we would save, which is pretty much equal to a couple admin salaries to completely shift an entire town. One of the other things you're not thinking about, perhaps, is that when you do that, you're permanently altering the demographic of our community. So what happens when a town closes their only school? Young families move out to move to a town nearby that does have a school, perhaps Ashby or Townsend or Pepperell, since they're right there. So you're seeing a direct flip in enrollment where Ashby numbers start to decrease. But then think of this over time, there is no young family in the world that is going to be eyeing a house in a town with no school. So what does this do long-term to our demographic? Ashby is no longer a family-friendly town. So we're going to see a change in enrollment numbers. We're going to see a change in kindergarten registration. Year after year, how does this impact things? Every time there's a decrease in Ashby numbers, guess what? Assessments rise in Townsend and Pepperell, particularly if you have people moving out of town to move to one of those towns. Like I said, it's a direct flip. So now you're looking at permanently having a regular increase in assessments for Townsend and Pepperell. So that needs to be considered. And I'm almost done, I promise. But you're talking about closing a school that's been recognized 3 times as one of the top in the state. I don't know any other schools in our district that have, and perhaps they have, but under Mrs. C's leadership, we've been awarded that 3 times now. So it's strange to me that of all the schools, the one that we should be particularly proud of is the one that's being targeted right now. And lastly, I just want to say, oh, actually not lastly, sorry. One other point I wanted to have about changing the demographic of these towns. When you have all these families leave Ashby, think about the voter base that's left, because who pushes through these overrides for you? Parents and families do. Who pushes through these projects? Parents and families do. When Ashby doesn't have that anymore, you have lost all of that support. And you just, anyway, you've lost that support. So just my last point I want to make, because I've heard it said a couple times, this is about numbers. It's nothing personal. It's about numbers. It's not about numbers. It's about people. It's about people's lives. It's about our community. So please think very carefully about the lasting impacts that you're talking about here. Thank you.
Thank you, June. Anyone else? Randy?
I certainly echo a lot of pretty much everything that June had said. Just very, very briefly, we gave our word. We gave our promise to Ashby, and we continually treat the community as they are second rate, that they don't deserve the same rights as the other 2 towns, that we're not listening to them. I think it's appalling we're even bringing this up again, but why don't we bring this down to numbers again? Because we want to do that. June brought up a couple of good points about increases that are going to be happening at Squanicook, because the Collins report that said we should close Ashby also said that there's some major, couple $100,000 that needs to be done to Squanicook to put them in there. So no one's talking about that when we're putting in the potential savings here. Has the solar panels that are on Ashby, has that been taken into account as far as the costs? Because we won't have those solar panels, we won't have the credits from those, and that's going to increase electricity costs for the entire district of the buildings that are left, because we will no longer be able to have that. I also don't know what happens with the contracts. It's a 20-year contract for the solar panels. It's a set amount of money that we pay for 20 years. I'm not sure if that can be transferred, and we may have to end up paying that anyway, regardless of whether we have the building. So that's something else to consider as far as costs for that building. So I think it's a rash decision to, at this last minute, to even try and think about closing a school. There's so many things that we're not thinking of. Closing a school requires a very thought out, thorough process to take a look at everything. We did this the last time in 2009 when we tried closing down Squanicook and the Fitz. And lo and behold, for a few years, we couldn't close down either one of them because of different, different things there. It was a rash decision then. and we didn't get the savings that we wanted to in the immediate year. For the FITs, we had money from the MSBA that we needed to pay off. If the school closed, we'd have to pay that back. At Squanicook, I think we had a similar situation, and there were other reasons why we didn't close that school down. So again, a hastily thought out closing a school on the numbers, very bad idea. It will come back and bite us. That is not a good idea in any situation. We haven't even looked in to see what the process of handing a building back to Ashby would be. We have, a lease and, throwing it back last minute. That's also not something we can do. I'm just looking down my list. I apologize. I think it's a little disingenuous to talk about the savings we might have in investments that we don't have to invest in Ashby going forward, because we just will have investments in other schools because the same number of students are using another building. You have the wear and tear, you have all of the same issues as in Ashby that are going to happen in another building. We, a couple of years ago, well, I guess maybe it was more than 5 years ago or so, we had brought up doing a middle school reconfigure, doing 5 and 6 at Hawthorne Brook, 7 and 8 over in Nissitissit. The reason for that was looking at equity for education. And we had so much pushback because of the busing alone that Pepperell didn't want their students to be bused out of their town and have an hour ride. Townsend didn't want it in 7th and 8th grade to be bused to Pepperell for an hour ride. We dropped it. We didn't push forward. We didn't go through with it. And yet here we're talking about Ashby, and they've been crying for 5 years. They don't want the time on the bus for our littlest students in the district. They're saying they want to pay for the building. They're working out ways to do that. They're investing money that we told them that if you invest that, we wouldn't do this again. And here we are talking about closing the building again for a couple $100,000. I would like to know what the class sizes are going to be with the reduced classes. I know Ashby does have a couple of classes that are on the smaller side. What are the class sizes actually going to be? Because I'm not sure that it's going to be equitable with the rest of the elementary schools over in Pepperell, because you are adding students, and to reduce by the entire classroom, what does that bring it to? That is all I have for the moment.
Thank you, Randy. Was Patrick first or Lisa?
Lisa can go next. That's fine with me.
Lisa Bloom.
Hi. I just want to say I'm a at-large seat, and I do totally represent Ashby, and I support June and Randy and everything they just said. I do also feel that cutting our athletic director is a bad choice. Because
Lisa,
yes,
you can't talk about positions.
well, it's on the on all the different options.
That one's highly confidential.
Okay. But also, I think the better choice would be closing Squanicook and moving the pre-K to Ashby, and then Central District to different buildings in the high school or so forth as well. There's also a lot of admins, and why do we need 5 secretaries? Why do we need 6 people in our technical department? And our 2 assistant principals at the high school, when our students have to suffer without having the teachers they need. I don't know. I mean, can anybody answer those questions? Why we need 5 secretaries?
I'm confused as to what you mean by 5 secretaries, Lisa.
Well, there's, admins, there's executive admin. So there's Tracy Patondo, Robin Ivy, Donna Kenyon, Andrea Royer. And there was another, I thought I wrote her name down. There was another one as well. So, I mean, our central office is definitely top heavy. And
So
to start cutting all these.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly speak to that a little bit. Our central office can't even compare.
Brad,
Yeah, go ahead.
Lisa, no using of personal names in a public meeting like this of members.
I'm actually not going to discuss positions at this point.
Okay. I mean, everybody can see the positions and everything on the district page, so. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Patrick?
I'll go devil's advocate here and play the numbers, and I understand the emotional side, and this is just some food for thought. Out the gate, I toured both facilities today, and I'm not sure why you would choose to send children to the Ashby school over Squanicook, Lisa. Just day and night difference. I understand that this board in the past may have made the decision not to look at this school again. I wasn't on that board. I'm going to look at all the numbers. I'm going to see where the math lays. $300,000 from Ashby is not a drop in the bucket in what that school needs. I saw I believe 2020 was the year that third party estimate came out. And I think it was roughly, was it in $4 or $5 million? And that was before COVID. Everything's gone up, 17, 20%. There's a lot of work to be done there. And as far as I'm aware, that school is still owned by Ashby. So it's an expense for the Ashby taxpayer. So if they want it that bad, I'm just not sure why they haven't found the money or repaired it yet. It was just, it's not a great building. What I saw today were teachers teaching. I saw children learning, and that's why they are top in the state, because of the teachers and the admins and the students, not the building. And as far as it's only saving a couple $100,000, that's annually. That's every year, as opposed to a one-time expense to move. So there's just some things to consider. If the only thing I read about 30 emails from parents from Ashby, and the only thing that I consider to be a true concern is the bus ride. If the bus ride is that long, then maybe it's something we consider of setting a time of how long can kids be on the bus and making the math work there if we add an extra bus. That's something to consider. But outside of that, I didn't see much of a concern or a reason to keep it open. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you, Patrick. William or Bill? Whoops, you're breaking up, Bill. Whoops, we can't understand you, Bill.
Is that
That is better. Thank you.
We can go to the next. Go to Randy, and I'll get back. I'm having trouble.
Okay. Randy?
Yes, so 2 things on Patrick, what you had said. One, to answer you, why hasn't Ashby come up with money in the past to do this, is yes, they own that building, and yes, they are responsible for the changes or the improvements and the money to be put into it. But we have been leasing that building for the last 30, 40 years. I don't know how long we've been in there and leasing it from them. And part of that lease is we are the custodians of that building. We are responsible for maintaining it And we are responsible for bringing these projects to the town should large projects need to be done and that they need to pay for it. We have not done our job there. Everything that we have brought to them, the last major project we brought to them was the windows and door repairs for the accelerated repair, and they passed that, and they did that. We have not brought to them any major projects to be done. So we are just as much as at fault as them, probably more so on the district side, because we're in those schools every day and we have our maintenance men in there and we know exactly what needs to be done for that building. They don't necessarily know that. They're not in that building every day. They have entrusted it to us. Yes, 300,000 is not, it doesn't come close to what it needs right now, but it's a good faith amount of money to put towards there to find out what their options are so they can make decisions to invest money. I don't know anybody who's going to sit there and put up $10 million and have a vote to put $10 million into a school before they know what the options are and what that money would go towards. That's what this $300,000 is doing right now. It is upgrading anything that is an immediate need for safety, and they're putting the rest of the money into figuring out what else, what are the options they have to go and consider investing in. As far as adding a bus to cut down on the cost, yes, absolutely, that's what's going to end up happening, and that bus cost is going to increase. It's a huge budget driver that goes up more than the 2.5% every single year. And here you're talking about now taking, as far as the building costs, only $100,000 estimated utilities cost, and probably putting that right back in with a bus that costs over $100,000 per year that goes up by 5-10% every single year. So you're replacing some of these things with drivers in the district that are going to go up substantially more than having the building and having those costs that we are doing right now. We have done this before. Nancy, I'm not sure if you have records or have a recollection. The last time that we did the windows and door repair, did we have to increase the busing then? I know it's different amounts of students, different places, so things could be a little bit different, but back in 2012-ish, 2010 timeframe, we had a year where we moved them into Squanicook so those repairs could be done.
Oh, really?
All right, Bill?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things I just want to, I do agree with the, we do need to look before we would make a decision like this on all of the costs, the additional costs that we're not looking at in this projected savings of closing Ashby. I was around, my kids were in school when we tried to close the other two buildings. And we saw where that ended up, the savings that was projected, and we said we were going to close them, and the savings wasn't there. But what I don't see in here, we're talking about the numbers. I don't see a fourth option where we looked at closing Squanicook. What would the savings be there? What would costs be? It's an option to look at, I think. So I think that should be an option number 4 on here.
Thank you, Bill. Patrick?
I don't remember what I was going to say. It was going back on Randy's point about transportation costs increasing, everything increased. They're all increasing. All those salaries and everything versus one bus might be a wash. And I think we do need a deep dive. And then going back to the building, has Ashby done anything to like assess the building, have a plan in place, a third party come in and look at it again to see what it truly needs? I mean, I couldn't even view a wing of it today. We couldn't go to the first floor. Like, it's so bad you can't walk in it, and you're talking about safety. I just don't understand. I mean, there's the wheelchair ramp that doesn't work with the stairs that don't work. The gym is a crack coming down the wall. It looks like it's falling off the building. So I'm just not sure. Like, I think a feasibility study should be done. I don't, if we don't vote on this, tonight, that's fine with me. But I would hate for you to put $300,000 into a building that is not going to function, and it honestly looks like you're just painting a car that doesn't run. It may have been too long, and that's 40 years worth of neglect. That's not anyone board or any select members problem or fault. Like, that's just kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Patrick.
And then,
Jill?
sorry, one,
Oh, sorry.
Brad,
Go
that
ahead.
one- sorry, I had one more question. Brad, the one year that everyone did have to go to Squanicook, was there an impact? Were you here for that? Was there an impact on the students? How did that work?
I was not here for that.
Okay.
All right, Jill?
I just wanted to say that I would not be in favor of closing a towns only school.
All right. Jim?
I just wanted to clarify, since it was just mentioned, that the ramp has been inspected by the building inspector and deemed safe, and that the old wing has been closed and sealed due to the asbestos, but because there's a possibility that wing will be used in the future at some point by the town or the district when we are ready to abate that section. The section under the hallway is what the town's money was just allocated for. Like I just said, I'm wondering if that was a bad idea at this point, because I never in a million years would have thought anyone would go back on their word and bring this up again, but anyhow.
Jill, did you have a question? Or comment?
No, the little hand won't go down.
Okay.
You just erased it. It's the same button, Jill.
Got it. Thank you.
Will?
I have 4 different comments here in random order, I guess. The first is going back a little bit on the discussion on the E&D. Just want everybody to have understanding on the E&D. The account in the E&D is very small compared to a $68 million budget. It's our savings account, and we're talking about less than 3%. I've witnessed it over the years. Nancy does a fabulous job, and her team on the finance side of it, of running that budget on a very razor thin line. And every time we go pluck back into that E&D for more and more money, it's our savings account, albeit one time, that we're chipping away at. So I want everyone to remember that part of it. My next one is just, I talked to, June, whatever, the comment about targeting Ashby. This is not a target on Ashby. This is not what we're going with at all. Okay. I just want to make sure you understand that that's not this intent. It's to go through this to figure out where we go. Again, not happy about where we're at. The other one on the OPEB, and many of you that have been around for a while know this is kind of my thing. I look at the number of retired teachers that we have that we're paying for health insurance now. Okay. It's contracted number. It's a large number. We also have a number of teachers that are in this district that will be retiring that we have already agreed to pay their health insurance down in the future. When you look at the present value of that number, it's a very large number. And I don't want to misquote where we stand with that, because I haven't read that report recently, but irregardless of that, it's a very large number, and the money we do towards that is to help with that future cost, which also goes back to the towns, because if we can work on some of those future liabilities, it helps the bond ratings for these 3 towns. Now, it's not a, great number, but any little piece we can do in that savings side of it, I think is another piece there. And just because, I know some people on here are newer to this, don't have some of the history on it. There has been on the table for a lot of years with Ashby is demoing that wing of the building, and it's never been addressed. You know, the building committee piece of it, yes, is working. It's just now set up. So it's not like, and Randy, you know, don't take offense to this because this is not a disagreement with you, okay, by any stretch. I think you know where I stand, but this is, you know, it has been out there that wing needs to be demoed for years. This is not a new thing. So, and we just need to take action at some point. So, get off my soapbox.
Randy?
So a couple of questions I have on the END, and then I'm gonna throw out a couple of suggestions for additional cuts or money and the philosophy for why I'd be putting that out there. Nancy, I went looking for the final budget details for FY23 in the drive. I could not find the June 30th report for FY23 on how much money went back into END that year. If you could provide that, that would be very helpful. While she's trying to get that, my thoughts on this are, we are trying to make this decision and nobody's happy about having to make the decisions. But the reason why we're having to make it at this point in time is because Brad needs to know if he needs to lay off teachers and paras, we need to do it per their contracts for the paras on May 15th. And like we've discussed before, it's only fair to teachers, which their contract I think is June 15th, but it's only fair to let them know at the same time if they may not have a job in the district. We care about our teachers. And we obviously want to keep all of them, but we want to be fair to them if the budget doesn't allow it. So we're making this decision before we know whether the towns are going to approve the submitted budget. Best case scenario is we get the budget we submitted, and everything we're doing right now is just an academic exercise on what we might do. With that said, because if we don't get the budget this year, we will be back next year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This isn't like the last 10 years where we're like, you know, this would be a really great budget. Okay, we'll whittle it away because we can still give a decent education without 2 or 3 positions, and we'll get it down for what the towns need. We're well past that now. We've been discussing that since we started this budget process. Our costs have now gone up exponentially between inflation, between just the drivers in our budget that we've been discussing forever. We can either A, make a whole bunch of cuts tonight and put out some pink slips, and the worst case scenario is we don't have a budget. We need to submit again to the towns and wind up with a budget that fits in with the 2.5% or 3% into their budgets that without an override. And then we'll be back next year to try and replace everything that we're cutting now. And the children lose out. I'm going to suggest that we do use some one-time money, make it expressly clear that it means that if we don't get the budget this year, next year it will be larger because we have to replace the one-time money to get back to where we are to be able to provide an education for these children. But it gives us a year where the students are not losing out. It gives us a year to try and get our message out. And it gives the towns another year to consider everything and fund us like we really need, as well, you know, along with the town services, because I'm not suggesting that the towns need to go without either. So my suggestions for where we can save is 1, OPEB, we leave. We don't touch that. Well, I completely agree with you that that is an outstanding liability. It doesn't go down. We need to fund that. So I am not suggesting we take anything out of the OPEB funding and we leave that at the $150,000 that we've been doing since we established that account. But the capital stabilization fund, I know we've only been funding it for a couple of years, but if the towns cannot give us a budget this year that's going to meet the educational needs, then for this year, I don't feel that I can put $250,000 into a fund that's going to help them in the long term. And for this year only, I would suggest that we not only not fund it, which at this point in time is $100,000 in the budget, but we spend $250,000 from that account for our annual capital projects that we need. That's a $350,000 savings in our budget. It also, using the money from the capital stabilization, we don't have to decrease the capital expenditure on a yearly basis that we need to do on the buildings. In addition to that $350,000 savings, I would, depending on where the numbers for the E&D fall from FY23 on what we put back into the budget. Okay. Right now it is estimated and it can go up and down. We still have a month and a half left. Around $2 million left right now that will go back into the E&D. It's this chronic revolving. For the new people, if you do not know, we have a 5% cap on our E&D account that we can accumulate there. It's not an ever increasing amount. Once it gets to 5%, we have to give money back to the towns on anything over that. So whereas, yes, we're putting $2 million, $2,045,000 or 2.2 this year. I forget what it is. I think it's 2.2 this year that we put into it. We get money at the end of the year because Nancy has been such a fantastic, business administrator and really watches the budget and makes sure that we are saving and we're not overspending, that we do have some savings. It's not a lot. Will always say, 2-3% on a budget of 68 million is not a lot to save, but we do consistently do that. So I would suggest probably $300,000 to $500,000 again, depending on what we put in FY23. And then we have circuit breaker money. Again, not wanting to do this on a consistent basis. I know Nancy is not comfortable with taking more out of there, that we want to make sure that we have money for costs that come up in the budget for special education. But if we can take a little bit more money of that circuit breaker and put it towards us to get us 1 year down the line so that we don't have to impact the students as much, I would be in favor of that. Okay. With those three things, we'd be looking at, we can even reduce what's being suggested for staff cuts by about another $500,000 to $850,000, depending on how much we take from E&D and from circuit breaker, and be able to keep more of the teachers. Again, hopefully we get the budget. None of this has to get done. In the worst case, we get an extra year without having to impact the students, and another year to make the case to the towns. And that's my speech.
Okay, thank you, Randy. June?
I'm just going to say that I am definitely in favor of what Randy proposed, and I would rather go with that option than any of the three options presented.
I am going to make a comment about Ashby for right now. This is something that we seriously need to do a deeper dive into. And I know that I know what it is to be in a small town and have your school and lose it. But I also know what it's doing to all three of our towns as well. There is a discrepancy between all three of our elementary schools. And we all need to examine that closely. and make sure that we understand that the level of education is different for those three schools of our elementary and even our middle schools. It's not an option that I think we examine tonight because it does take a deep dive, and we need to talk with Ashby about a true study on their building. I know that that was proposed 2 years ago, that they do a true study to figure out how much they would be willing to pay. And I know that the families will fight hard for it, but there is also a population of your tax base, and we never have heard from the tax base in Ashby if they are in support. So I do highly recommend that we do a deeper dive into it, but not tonight. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Randy?
Just want to add, I had taken the time today to take a look back at some of our previous meetings, and when the Collins Center had presented to us, they did a lot of outreach to the communities, not just the parents, but the full communities. And they did find about 60% of the tax base in Ashby was in support of putting money towards and fixing the school and saving it. And that was from the Collins Center.
And how long ago was the Collins Center? Was it 5 years ago?
2 years ago? I think we heard it in, was it 22? I want to say it was like, it was either 21 or 22. Late 21 or early 22. We can go back and take a look. You know, if we're not making a decision on.
I
doing
missed
it,
the
that's
report,
fine.
so it was in my gap there, Randy, so.
If I could just jump into and say I'm fine with kicking this can down the road. This is my second meeting. I don't want to close the school, but if the town's not supporting it, if it's not getting what it needs financially to survive, then that's kind of what it is. So this is just me kind of again learning and just seeing where we're at. I just saw the school today, and it needs a lot of money and attention. And if Ashby's willing to do that, I support that. And if they need time, I can support that. But we need to figure that out.
Tom, do you have any thoughts? I know that you joined the meeting late.
No, I'm just catching up with everybody and kind of just hearing things out. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Anyone else? Oh, Bill, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to point out again, so we have these three options here that are on there, but it sounded like there was two other options to look at. Randy's proposal to put up here, as well as looking at the Squanicook option. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill. Will?
I just want to go back to one point that Randy made about, the one-time funds. Part of the reason we're here is that in previous years, certainly with ESSER, we accepted the one-time fund commentary and didn't get that increase. We just got it for that year. And, that's one of the reasons we're here, is that we took some one-time funds before to make that sort of negotiation in the past, and it didn't get that on the increase where that may, really have helped us at that time. So.
Thank you, Will. Brad or Nancy or Gary?
Sure. So just wanted to put out there that we obviously need some direction from the committee tonight as far as which direction to go. It does sound like what Randy's proposing is kind of a combination of 1 and 2, but also looking at stabilization as well, and potentially using some stabilization funds, but on top of that, using some circuit breaker funds as well. So we just need to know so we can go back, because ultimately we do have to make decisions on staff by Wednesday. So we do need a plan from the committee as far as what you can all support so that we make sure that we stay in line with that when it comes to potentially making reductions. And again, we can go back, relook at the numbers again tomorrow. It does appear as though there was an error made with OPEB and stabilization. So we can look at that tomorrow, but ultimately it's not going to change the fact that that pink slips are going to have to be issued. I did want to touch base with Mr. Berg. We did look at Squanicook, and it's just not, when you look at the needs of the district and the fact that we have both a pre-K program and the LEAP program there is no other location in the district to put that without potentially causing some significant cost increases, excuse me. There is no room at Varnum Brook currently. There is no room at Spalding currently. The only place that there would potentially be room would be Ashby Elementary, and that would cause likely a significant increase in transportation costs, an increase in service provider costs, and also create a situation where the district pre-K really isn't centrally located, which is something right now that I know parents, from what I've heard from parents, something that parents certainly appreciate, because I know for a period of time it wasn't Pepperell. Predates me again. I'm not even sure if that's accurate. But if it is accurate, I know that the Townsend and Ashby families were not thrilled with that setup. So having it be in Townsend is something where it is, again, centrally located for all three towns. Certainly it works out great for Townsend, but it's not too far of a ride from Pepperell or Ashby either. But the bottom line is that there is no location that's not going to cost a significant sum of money to move that program elsewhere. We also don't know if we would maintain the level of general students that are in that program as well, and it has to be an integrated preschool.
Thank you, Brad.
So again, just from the committee, if the committee is, I know the proposal is out there to use additional stabilization fund, maintain the money in OPEB, but use additional stabilization fund money, use additional E&D, potentially use additional circuit breaker money if that is available. But circuit breaker only funds after the first $45,000. So that's something that we have to look at as well. But definitely need some direction from the committee, because and again, I realize this is rushed. It comes at our town meetings come at a very difficult time of the year, and the contracts are the contracts, statutes are the statutes, and we're not going to have an answer prior to having to make these decisions. So we do have to move on it.
I have a question, Randy, first, before you go. Nancy, with the stabilization fund, if we use money out of that, does that have to go back to the towns to approve that we use the money?
I believe we would make it as part of the budget vote. They do, the school committee has the authority to vote it. I just have to look at the mechanics of it.
Okay.
So I think it's a 2/3 of the school committee has to approve to vote money out of stabilization.
Okay. Okay, now Randy.
First, I did look up the stabilization fund, and I have an advisory on regional school district stabilization funds. And it says expenditures are made directly from the stabilization fund. A transfer into the general fund is not required. Expenditures should be reported on the end of the year financial report as an additional appropriation of the school committee. So yeah, so if I'm under, and I'm putting a big if on this, if I'm understanding this document correctly, it's just a vote because we already have the town's approval to put the money in there, and this is just an appropriation that we can make. That said, Nancy, were you able to take a look at the FY23 end of year?
Yeah, we rolled about $1.5 million into E&D from FY23 operations. And there was a prior balance that we didn't spend the full amount the prior year, and then that $1.5 million got added to it. And I recently ran, I can share with the committee the most recent update for this year's spending, which is, I was around 1,000,003. I need to rerun it today, when I get back to the office, and I can forward that to everybody. But we were around 1,000,003. We actually kind of did a bit of a freeze to hold because things were running a little bit higher than usual this year. So we've been being really conservative for the remainder of this year, plus with the budget as it is. And again, if we were to use the additional E&D, that means we start next year without that in there, because normally, like if we had rolled the 630,000 into it, we would start the year with 630. So we could end up in a situation next year. This year we used, with the most recent budget, we used 2,045,000 of the 2,600,000. If we don't replenish that, we won't have that money for next year. So it's just a kind of a balance of being conservative for the remainder of this year and hoping that we're rolling enough into the E&D. But if we're using 2,006,000, we won't roll anything in other than what we finished the year with. And any revenue. Sometimes we get additional revenues we don't anticipate. I think we've discussed those in the past. Some of the collaboratives sometimes have a required return of funds to the district, and that we don't budget that. So that, again, it would be something over the budget that we planned for. We didn't plan for that we might get that would go back into E&D. We can look at those numbers too.
Okay, well,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Randy.
I just wanted that number. What I was gonna say is I can certainly make a motion. If we use the $250,000 from the stabilization, don't fund the 100,000, that's 350,000. We need $300,000 combination to get to the same savings that is in option 1 and option 2 in this first part. So just letting everybody understand where the numbers stand as far as that's concerned.
So
And that's OPEB, correct? That's, we all agree.
It does not touch OPEB.
Thank you.
So what about implementing a technology fee?
So that's something that I did put on there as well. It's not there, but it is on the sheet that I shared with the committee yesterday. It's not on this evening sheet. Right now, that's certainly a cost to the district. We do struggle. There is no plan in place, and it's also extremely difficult to get families to cover damaged or lost Chromebooks. There's really no mechanism. So I do think having an annual technology user fee with something, $100 to use technology, that would certainly cover the costs of lost, damaged, and also replenishments as needed. Just something to consider. I don't love any of the three options, just to be clear, but I do just want to express I'm very concerned about using one-time funds in the fear that the overrides fail, what we're going to be looking at next year, because it will be significantly more of an ask and more of a lift if the overrides probably don't pass successfully in all three towns, just because it will create a very difficult situation for any town that it doesn't pass in. I feel there's a responsibility to mention that, because it's scary this year. Again, it was a big lift. And if we're back here again next year after using our one-time funds and the overrides fail, the lift is going to be substantially higher. And I'm not quite sure how we could respond to that.
So, Will, before you go, I'm just going to make a statement so that the public's aware. Brad is only the architect of the plans, and he is responsible to the school committee to give us all of the possibilities, and we give him feedback on the direction to go. If he didn't lay out all the possibilities for us, he would not be doing his job properly. So I just want everybody to know it's a committee's decision on the direction that the budget goes, not Brad's decision. All right? Is that correct, Randy? Did I get that? I covered it?
Yes, absolutely. One of our charges, the most important charge is the budget. And that's what we have control over and what we get to say on how much we are going to fund in the different areas. Can I just add one more thing for the public's knowledge is the fees that we're talking about putting in for extracurriculars and for sports it breaks my heart that the potential that somebody's not going to be able to afford and do these things. But it is something that I truly believe is something that enhances every student's experience in education to have these opportunities, and having these fees in place is going to allow us not to eliminate them as we originally were talking about. So these fees are a compromise to be able to keep all of these opportunities for the students with being able to fit it into our budget.
All right. Will you have been patient? I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, I just, in a methods here to try to continue this conversation.
Whoops.
Sorry. What's similar in all three of these is the first 5 items here, the increase for extracurriculars, the full day in the kindergarten increase, the ESSER funds, the curriculum, the technology. I just kind of want to know as a group if we agree with all of those 5 that are on those, the 5 that are listed there, those are the commonalities. Are we all okay with that, as we go forward? And then just my second question back to Brad on this technology fee scenario. What is, if someone chose not to pay that $100, does that mean we're in a bring your own device category, which I thought we had some issues with in the past, or what's the other scenario there?
You're on mute, Brad.
That's something that just came up today. So certainly something that we could explore looking at. But I will say that that right now technology is an issue in the district, in that there really isn't districts that that require students to pay for lost or damaged Chromebooks do struggle with regaining those funds, just like they do struggle when books are lost. At the end of the year when the student leaves, there's no real mechanism for the district to do anything about it, especially when they're leaving the school district. There's no legal way for you to actually obtain that money. So we'd have to look at, potentially something with the student would be able to use it, but they would not be able to travel with it. It would stay in the classroom, something along those lines. But I don't think it's a bad idea, because we really don't have anything in place right now to recoup losses.
Just to be clear, these are the options moving forward, but they're not set in stone until the overrides don't work out. Is that correct? I'm
Yeah, the
stating
only
that
thing
correctly.
the only thing we have to move on is the staffing piece. And likely the ESSER, because we have to submit a new plan.
So the votes are June 11th and June 18th. Our next school committee is June 13th. How do we want to do this, Randy?
With that said, I guess the big question really kind of is, and unfortunately the devil's in the details, is do we want to take the top half and say we'll figure it out and leave the reductions as is? Or do we want to try and reduce some of those reductions by adding in some other resources of one-time money into the top. Like I said, my scenario of saving the $350,000 with the capital stabilization fund, using it and not funding it, we need $300,000 more to get to exactly what's here for the reductions. If we want to use more E&D or try and use some of the circuit breaker, we can reduce some of those staff reductions.
Anyone else have a comment?
Okay.
No one.
I can just hop in and say, as far as what Will said about those top 5 line items, he was just asking how we felt. I would be on board with those. Just, I'm not sure how everyone else feels.
June?
I'm good with Randy's scenario. I think that if we could possibly save any teachers for one more year of being cut, that we should go ahead and do that.
William or Bill, sorry.
That's okay. Just a quick question, and I'm new to this. This is only my second meeting as well. But this circuit breaker fund, could someone explain what that is briefly, just please?
I think Nancy or Gary.
That's when your lights go out at your house, you go down, you clip the breaker so that it comes back on. Oh, no, sorry.
So I'm happy to give a brief explanation, and Nancy, correct me if I misspeak. But circuit breaker is a reimbursement program for special education costs that are excessive, for such as like students that are in out of district placements or costs that go beyond. Basically, the state looks at 4 times what the average per student cost is in the state, and then they reimburse a percentage beyond that cost. So for FY24, I know Mr. Morgan said earlier it's around 45,000. It's estimating around anything beyond almost 51,000. And then the reimbursement percentage that we're looking at for next year is about 75% of eligible costs beyond that $51,000 threshold.
Okay,
That's great, Gary.
thank you.
Maybe I can, is it okay if I jump in, Lisa?
Yep, go ahead, Nancy.
I just want to say that I guess my feeling on this would be to overestimate what we need for the Wednesday deadline until we're really comfortable with the final numbers, and using any amount. I mean, we already have someone at the ESSER funds that are in this list are already one-time money, so we're already behind next year by that amount. And anything that we add to that, we're $2 million using E&D, 200,000 for ESSER. That starts us out next year at 2,200,000 off before we use any other one-time money. Now we can use it; it's there. The idea of the circuit breaker funding is that we are able to roll 1 full year of revenue in that account. And the reason you do that is because in any given year, you don't know if you might get a move-in placement. Could be a very expensive move-in placement that we have no, and those funds are there for that as a backup for that purpose. So we're already likely below rolling 1 full year because we're using some of those funds already. And again, we can possibly look at using some of them. I just don't think you want to get in that situation where you have a mid-year problem if you have 2 or 3 move-ins that you weren't expecting. And so that's the reason to have that fund there. But again, I think overestimating on, because we can't, I guess, I mean, maybe Anne Marie could weigh in on this, but as far as the process goes, we have to give notice by that deadline so that people are aware. that this is coming, and I don't know that we can do a mid-year if something's not going well next year. We can't, I don't believe we can go back. Maybe she could comment on that.
Obligation with one of our units for May 15th. Under the statute for teachers, it's June 15th. I think the only way what Nancy was referring to with if it came down to mid-year would be if we were in a position where we ended up going on that 112 budget and didn't find out until mid-year what our budget was, then that would obviously be out of our hands. But, you know, from the human perspective, I would really want to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. I don't want people coming to work every day worrying if that's going to be the day that they're going to get a layoff notice. I just don't think that's any way to conduct business and try to educate students.
Randy?
Yeah, I mean, yes, in my thoughts, it was not a lot in the circuit breaker. I believe you had projected that there would be about 1.425 million in that account, and I do see the value in having that because we do have a very high special education community here, whether it be an IEP or out of district placements. We are above the state right now, and and I certainly want to have that money there as a safety, because that can be very, very expensive. We wouldn't want to have to make cuts. I was really kind of looking at $400,000 or less from that account, just again trying to offset a little bit. And like I said in the beginning, you know, fingers crossed. This is an academic exercise. We don't have to go through this with this year, but next year know that if we do save a lot of these jobs so that the students don't have a diminished education for this 1 year, that we can make the case, and we're going to come back with a larger increase to replace some of this money. And the same thing goes for the END. Is a little bit more money right now, may bring it down a little bit lower than what we typically have had, but I don't think we have a lot of history of having to go into our END, certainly not on a regular basis mid-year, trying to get funds for something catastrophic that happens during the year. So to reduce it a little bit for right now and let it build up afterwards, I see it as worthwhile, again, to try not to impact the kids as much as we can while trying to get a budget that we need.
Brad?
I just wanted to point out that if you're looking at options 1 and 2, again, they're essentially the same, it's just the funding's a little different. We're still having to make an additional $650K in staffing reductions if we don't utilize E&D, stabilization, so on and so forth. So I would probably focus on trying to use as much as we can to avoid additional cuts, but probably for now, keep the cuts that we have in place just to be sure. I will say, although it's 24.75 FTE, it's really more like 18.75 because 4 of them currently are not filled or they're part of the FY25 budget. And 2 of them are likely going to be primarily grant funded. So it's really a loss of about 18.75 because some of the positions currently are not filled. And we've been unable to hire. Some of them are not approved. They're approved in the school committee budget, but not, you know, the budget itself is not approved by the towns now. And then we have the use of grant funds. So it's really about a reduction of 18.75 staff as opposed to 24.75 staff, if that makes any sense to people on the call.
All right, Randy?
I apologize. I did have one more question, and that is, speaking of these cuts, Brad, if you can talk to, is this going to, these cuts going to increase class size? What is the major impact? Obviously there's an impact, but what the first thing we were trying to do is to prevent, you know, class sizes going up to 28 to 32. along with some other services that we think the students absolutely need to keep them progressing the way they need.
Yeah, so the class sizes would only go up to 28 to 32 if we were in the situation of cutting 30 plus staff. So right now, we were able to make somewhat of a shift in reductions due to high school population. The next year's incoming class is very, very small. The 8th grade class coming in. So the high school was able to do a deeper dive in looking at staff. And we've made some additional reductions district-wide to try to have as little impact on class size as we possibly could. As you know, the class sizes in Pepperell are already quite high. Spalding, they're also getting up there as well. So trying to avoid increasing class sizes there to the best of our ability. And I think we'll be able to do that with this current plan. Again, it's once, if we had to cut an additional 650K, an additional 6 to 8 staff, then we would have some serious problems with class size. And that's kind of what the budget presentations talked about, 31, 32 staff, not 24. It was really a reduction of one teacher almost at every grade level that created that problem. And again, hopefully, if these cuts did in fact have to stay, we are not counting on counting benefits as part of the savings at this point either, potentially. Just because we're not 100% sure who the staff are at this point. That's something that Anne-Marie would have to identify.
Any more questions?
And just obviously the hope is for the overrides to pass and for us to be able to maintain all these people.
Any questions? So the ask is to move forward with the cuts as we see here, and then work on the rest of the top budget if going forward. Is that correct? Is that how everybody understands it?
I would need to know as would Nancy, the one-time money from each area.
And the one-time monies.
Yes,
right?
Because that's what's going to stop the additional reductions. The stabilization, E&D, and potentially circuit breaker money.
All right.
So could I suggest option 2, and instead of pulling OPEB money, we pull it from somewhere else? Because I think that kind of lines up where it sounds like everyone's starting to agree and understand. It's kind of like a hybrid option 4, I suppose.
Right, so that the first 5 is roughly 900,000. And then if you go to, again, option 2 and say the 250s from stabilization and then another 400 from E&D, we're at 650. So that's $1,550,000, $1 million, right? 550, am I getting that right?
The savings from the
It's
stabilization. would
really
actually
closer
be-
to 1.5.
Yeah, the stabilization would be 350,000 if we don't fund the 100,000 and use 250 from the fund.
Where are you getting the extra 100?
Because right now we're funding that the stabilization fund at $100,000. If we reduce that to 0, and then we can use $250,000 and reduce our capital fund of the 250 by that amount we're going to use from the fund.
So taking option 2 and then making the stabilization 350 instead of 250. So now we're at 1.6 on those first. Let me go back to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Will?
Still trying to add it up in my head
Okay.
and on the calculator. So, I mean, then we're talking, but now we're only changing the staffing line by $100,000 down there to get to the roughly 3 million.
But we're keeping this staffing line as is though. So
As
just
is.
adding it in, right?
Yeah. Keeping the staffing line
Right.
as is. But building it up to like over 3 million. Is that correct? What was it? An extra 100,000?
There is an extra 100,000, or we can reduce E&D to 300,000 if you want to keep it the same.
But this is like, the staffing part needs to be decided tonight. The other options can be decided at our next meeting or meetings going forward. All right, do I have?
Well, Patrick made the motion for option 2, right?
I didn't make a motion yet. I was just asking the question of if it's
Oh,
possible.
okay, sorry.
I mean, I can make that motion that we go with.
Well,
call it
since we've been here for 2 hours now, I will second said motion of option 2. And then we have something to vote on.
All right. Let me get my. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Lisa Bloom.
Yes.
Bill.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the motion was that we were talking about the modification to the stabilization, the E&D, and leaving the staffing as presented here, correct? Yes, then yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Will.
No.
June.
Yes.
Patrick.
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Jill.
Yes.
And myself. Yes. All right. Now, ready to move on? I think we have an executive session.
I don't know if we need the executive session. I had put it on there just in case an update was needed for negotiations, but I haven't heard that it was needed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I know that this is a hard discussion to have, and I thank you for your time. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved. Second word.
Okay, so we got Patrick and Bill. Randy,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jill,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and myself is yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Aye.